have an aunt that lives here in town, and an uncle, and they have been gracious again to allow me to stay with them, and so it's been cool to kind of catch up with her. But it's interesting how God works, is it not? I mean, this afternoon as I was kind of prepping and feeling, God leading me in a direction, you might want to bring that down just a little bit. It was interesting just to kind of see how it all unwinded. It never surprises me, but it's just an interesting, and I think as I walk through, and again, my plan wasn't to do a study in the Gospel of Luke, but it's working out that way. So, but that's okay. It's a rich text, and so as you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to go to Luke chapter 8. And this is where we're going to kind of be for the night and for a section of it, and then move to the end of the chapter and just look at some different things. But even in the midst of Dennis Jernigan, which is Oklahoma guy and worship guy, came out of a alternative lifestyle, and God changed his whole direction. I didn't tell Dee what I was talking about tonight, didn't give him the text, didn't give him the topic. I just said, come back in Luke, and interesting just to kind of hear some of the words that we just worshipped, but also just kind of how, I don't know, maybe that will make more sense as we get going. But I want you to go to Luke chapter 8, starting with verse 22. Luke chapter 8, verse 22, it says, Now, on one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he said to them, Let us go to the other side of the lake. And so they launched out. As they were sailing along, it's kind of interesting that it says that he fell asleep. And a fierce gale of wind, or this storm, descends on the lake, and they began to be swamped and to be in danger. And verse 24 says, They came to Jesus, woke him up, saying, Master, Master, we are perishing. And he got up and he rebuked the wind and the surging waves, and they stopped. And it became calm. And verse 25 says, And he said to them, Where is your faith? They were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, Who is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him? Now, this is in reference to a physical storm. If you're with me, say I am. Massive, fierce of gale winds coming onto this lake, coming onto this boat. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that or been in a storm physically, but it gets kind of crazy. And it just says, that he tells them this is what we're going to do, and they do it. And it's interesting because Jesus is the Messiah. We know that. Jesus is the Son of God. We know that, yet he's God too. And it's kind of interesting from the humanistic side of things that even though we know that those things are true about Christ, that he physically gets tired. You and I get tired. We get tired every day. Some of you are tired right now. Full days work, whatever, school, whatever you were a part of, and you come in and you're tired. We're tired in the evenings. We do. We're a busy people. But it's interesting to me just the fact that we know that he is Jesus, the Son of God, but also God too. The fact, though, that on the human side of things, he was weary and he fell asleep. It says he fell asleep. The fierce gale came a pond descended on the lake, and it says that they began to be swamped, and it began to be in danger, and began to be overtaken by the storm. Like I said, I don't know if you've ever been out in a storm, if you've ever been close to a storm, whether driving in a car or on a lake or at your house. I remember last summer my son and I were in Colorado. I was preaching at a camp and in southwest Colorado, and we were on our way home, and I remember just kind of looking back, you know, when you're driving, and I'm in the Texas Panhandle, which is a bunch of nothing, and flat lands, and so you can see forever. And I remember getting on I-40 around Amarillo, and then jogging back to the east, headed towards Oklahoma, and I just began to see this it's getting dark, and it's this massive lightning, the beauty of lightning, and even though you know what comes with the craziness of lightning and storms and tornadic areas, and my phone is beeping as I'm driving down the road, as it's like an alarm that's going off, saying there's tornadic, stuff going on in your area. And I'm like, that's not cool. I mean, I'm in my little Ford Flex cruising down I-40 eastbound with my son in the back seat. I'm tired. I've preached all week, my heart out, and I'm just want to get home. Long story short is I'm on I-40 crossing and we basically get in between two sails. Now, not like a sail on a boat. I'm talking about two storm sails, and they're wicked, man. One's kind of coming this way, which is odd, and then one kind of traveling this way. And before I knew it, man, I've got tornadoes behind me, tornadoes in front of me, and I'm right in between it. And I'm like, man, just trying to pace myself. I called a friend that lives in Sayre, Oklahoma. He happened to be in Oklahoma City at the time. I think I might have woke him up. I'm like, man, I'm sorry, but can you just turn the weather on and kind of see what's going on? And he woke up, and because his town was in the path of the tornado, so I thought, well, maybe he's awake, but he was actually gone. Long story short, man, that was crazy. There were two tornado cells, one behind me, one in front of me. Kind of a scary deal. Even recent than that, there was a tornado a year plus ago in my town. It was an F3, maybe F4, and it came within a mile of my house. Went through and ripped up, devastation, homes, people lost everything in that. There was even a man that was killed, lost his own life. And so we know when we're talking about physical storms, being in Kansas, even based upon a tornado that happened in a movie that kind of made your state popular, you're not really necessarily foreign to the idea of storms, are you? Not in Kansas anymore, are we? Totally. And you see that in this storm that they begin to be swamped over, and so water is coming over the boat, and the disciples are just kind of rocking along, if you will. Jesus is underneath taking a nap, and they go into panic mode, and they wake him up, Master, Master, we are perishing. And what does Jesus do? I mean, this is phenomenal. This is the same Christ that some of you have given your life to, the same Christ that even today that Jesus is still drawing people to himself, that what he did on the cross, and he gets up from his nap and he just tells the wind and the waves to be quiet, and they do. Amen. Nobody else has that power to do that, yet Jesus did it. And we see that he even says, where's your faith? And I mean, man, this is kind of in the beginning part of the disciples' journey with Christ, and they're like, who is this guy? Even the winds and the waves obey. I want to switch gears with you for a moment. And I want to talk about something that I believe everyone faces in life. And I'm not talking about Dorothy and the tornado or where I'm from, the tornado, the storms. Other places deal with hurricanes. Other places deal with snow and ice, avalanche. But I want to talk about something that I believe is very relevant and very active in our lives, and that's the storms of life. Not a physical rain, but a storm that you walk through, that you deal with, that you suffer through, that you work through. An example of today, and listen, man, honest truth. I did not know this until after God put this in my path for tonight. I did not know that today is like Suicide Prevention Day. And I didn't know that in America, average 123 people take their life daily in our country because of suicide. And I mean, that's obviously a storm. Depression, anxiety, worriness, all those things, man. For me, the loss of my dad. For you, maybe it's illness, maybe it's a loss as well. But listen, church, we all have storms of life, do we not? We all have times in our lives that we need Christ. And even in the song, couldn't even tell you the title if we started it over again. But talking about being on our knees and being before the Lord and seeking God's direction, asking God to intercede in our life. And then I got on my phone this afternoon and realized that last night, a guy by the name of Jared Wilson, which is a pastor in California. Matter of fact, if I'm saying this correctly, he's on staff at Harvest Fellowship, which is in Riverside, which that may not ring a bell to you, but there's a guy named Greg Laurie that preaches all over the nation and does massive conferences and crusades and that sort of thing, kind of like a Billy Graham type person. I believe Jared was on his staff, and last night, Jared Wilson took his life at 30. Pastor, young family, 2 boys, and he dealt with depression. He was also a mental health advocate, and on Monday, he actually led a service for a lady that took her life. He preached her funeral. And that night took his own. And some people from Harvest Church says this, at times like this, there are just no words. Sometimes people may think as pastors or spiritual leaders that we are somehow above the pain and struggles of everyday people. We're the ones who are supposed to have all the answers, but we do not. And at the end of the day, pastors are just people who need to reach out to God for His help and strength each and every day. Even on September the 9th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Jared Wilson put this on Twitter before he took his own life. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure suicidal thoughts. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure depression. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure PTSD. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure anxiety. But that doesn't mean Jesus doesn't offer us companionship and comfort. He always does that. And I'm not just talking about suicide, but that is very, very, very active in our culture. Teenagers fall into this whatever. I mean, I've heard the stories, you've heard the stories where bulliness and teenage drama and different things like that, where a young person feels like because of the situation that they have no hope, they have no chance. They have no way to be victory instead of be defeated. And so they take their life. I mean, it happens every single day. Like I said, 123 people in the United States of America. And I feel like, man, sometimes, and it's nothing to downplay, it's nothing to say. I mean, this is a tragic story of another young person gone too soon. I even had a cousin this year that took her life at 27. It's real, folks. But you have an enemy that wants to kill, steal, and destroy. An enemy that wants to take life away from life. An enemy that wants to do everything that he can to actively rip you apart and to tear you down. And yet so many times, man, I didn't even look up. I was just blown away just by this stuff. I didn't even look up the people that are on depressants or medications or all these different things, or have, go to people with their problems. And I'm not saying that that's bad either. I'm just saying, listen, a lot of people do that. A lot of people suffer. A lot of people walk through anxiety, yet we know that at the end, Christ says, cast all your burdens unto me. Don't be anxious for anything. I am with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. But you have an enemy that continually, consistently wants to rip people apart. Do we not? And so you see Jesus, and if Jesus can calm a fierce gale, if Jesus can calm a storm on a lake with some guys on a boat, look at me, Jesus can calm anything that you face in your life. That's one of the problems, man. People don't turn to him. But listen, as we see in this sad story with this young pastor from California, believers aren't exempt from this stuff. The enemy still wants to do those things to us and to everyone that he can. And listen, some of you tonight may be walking through and walking in a valley, maybe walking through anxiety, maybe walking through depression. I mean, I don't know if I shared this last year, but man, I came across a kid, 13 years old, multiple times tried to take his own life. Multiple tragedies in his life. His brother was killed in a gun-related accident. His best friend took his own life. His own dad told him, he said, I'm your biological dad, but I don't want anything to do with you anymore. At the age of 13 years old, I don't understand how some of the pressures and some of that stuff, that doesn't make me only sad, but it makes me angry that somebody would say something like that to their own blood child. But we see in this physical storm that Jesus is the calmer. I want you to skip down to verse 40, and I want to read to you some other storms that's taken place in some other people's lives. If you follow me, say, I am. Amen. And we see in verse 40, as Jesus returned, the people welcomed him, for they had been waiting for him. And it says that, and there came a man named Jairus, and he was an official of the synagogue, and he fell at Jesus' feet and began to implore him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter that was about 12 years old, and she was dying. But as he went, the crowds were pressing against him. By now he has a following. It's not talking about Jairus, it's talking about Jesus. As he's going through his ministry, people are flocking him. People are coming to him. This officials of the synagogue knew what Jesus could do. And there were no news stations. There were no newspapers. There were no social outlets like we have today. But he knew that Jesus could help his situation. But it says the people were pressing against him. And look what happens in verse 43. Familiar story. There's no coincidences in the Bible. I don't even believe in coincidences or luck. Look what this says. And a woman who had a hemorrhage, that means bleeding, for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage or bleeding stopped. Listen, is that it an accident that a man has a 12-year-old daughter at home that's about to die, and yet when they're walking through the crowd and the people get pressed on him, all of a sudden there's a woman also that has a 12-year deal going on, that she's been bleeding for 12 years. It says no one is able to heal her. Doctors, nothing. No one has been able to help fix this problem. But she also knew about Jesus too. And she knew that Jesus could help her situation. And this is an incredible picture of faith of this woman, because it's the mindset of, I don't need to talk to him. I don't need to see him. I don't need to yell at him like we saw in Bartimaeus. I don't need to see him like Zacchaeus. I don't need to do those things. But what I need to do is, I believe that if I can just touch his clothes, that the power of him would heal me. And that's exactly what she does. I mean, can you imagine though, man? I don't even know. I'm no doctor. But can you imagine to be bleeding for 12 years? How weak she must have been. This is a lady that's hemorrhaging, bleeding for 12 years. And it says that she got to him. I can imagine she probably crawled part of the way. And yet she just touched his cloak, touched his garment. And it says immediately the bleeding stopped. And what happens? Jesus says, "Who touched me?" And you got disciples around him, and he's walking through this crowd, very popular. And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing into you." And Jesus said, "No, someone did touch me, for I was aware that power had gone out of me." Peter says, "People are all around you, man. You're being touched by all kinds of people." He's like, "That's not what I'm talking about. When something just touched me, someone just touched me, power left me, and I felt that." Now, Jesus knew everything. I believe that he knew it was her. But he said, "Someone touched me, for I was aware that power had gone out of me." And when the woman, listen, look at this, verse 47. This is a woman that had been bleeding for 12 years, and she touches the garment of Christ. And it says in verse 47, when the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, it said she came trembling. She was scared. She fell down before him and declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately physically healed. 12 years of bleeding stopped. 12 years of pain gone. 12 years of being able to function normally gone. It says when she touched him, immediately the blood stopped. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And so you see, wouldn't you say that that's a storm of life too? The fact that the woman had been that ill for so long, for 12 years, and then we have a 12-year-old girl that is ill as well. Not a coincidence at all. But you see, just in the moment, if you can't see it, let me show you. Just in the moment of the official of the synagogue coming to Christ and saying, I need your help. My only daughter, 12 years old, she's dying, and I need your help. But because of all the crowds, did you see that kind of shifted a little bit? The story moves on to something different, but it's coming back to where we were, because we see in verse 49 that while he was still speaking, someone from the house of the synagogue official came and said, "Your daughter has died. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." And I don't know about you, but those of you that have a child, I can't imagine. Because what that dude was doing the only thing that he knew. He was drawing at a last sense of hope. He was drawing at the last opportunity to have his daughter helped. And I guarantee you, if you had a child and you loved your child, and they were ill or they were sick or they were dying, you would do everything in your power to try to get them better. Everything in your power. And if you wouldn't, then that's a messed up thing. It's messed up for a dad to look at a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy and say, "I'm your daddy, but I don't want anything to do with you anymore." And we see where it says, "Your daughter has died. Don't trouble the teacher." But listen, man. They don't know who they're dealing with. Amen. Because in verse 50, it says, when Jesus had heard this, he answered him, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe, and she will be made well." And look at this. They leave this area. The woman that has been healed, the woman that was bleeding for 12 years, touched his clothes. Now she is healed. She is gone. "Peace be with you," he said. "Your faith has made you well." And we see in verse 51, they go to the house. And when they came to the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him except Peter, James, and John, and the girl's mother and father. Now, I don't know about you, man, but when somebody passes or when somebody that you love dies, man, we weep for them. We grieve for them. Sometimes I find myself grieving, continuing to do that, even for my dad. And he goes into the house, and he doesn't allow anybody but the 3 disciples that were with him a lot of the times, man. You catch that? There's 12 of them. But there's also a circle of 3. Man, and these 3 were in different, crazy, cool places with him. Like the Transfiguration and in the garden. I mean, there's so many different places where we see it's just Peter, James, and John. And when they go there, it says they were all weeping and lamenting for her. But the healer says, "Stop weeping, for she has not died, but is asleep." And they began laughing at him, it says. So you're telling me that all of a sudden, man, there's weeping and lamenting. That's what lamenting means, grieving and weeping. And then all of a sudden he says, "Listen, man, no need to weep. She's not dead. She's just asleep." But they knew, look at me, they knew she had already passed. The breathing had stopped. The heartbeats had stopped. They knew that she was already gone. And Jesus said, "She's not dead. She's just asleep." And it says they begin to laugh. I mean, that's kind of an interesting change of scenery, is it not? And he, however, it's kind of cool because they begin to laugh at him, and he, however, didn't faze him. And this is what he did. He took her by the hand, called out, saying 2 words. 2 words. Look up here. "Child, arise." Amen. "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up immediately. And he gave orders for something to be given to her to eat. Her parents were amazed, but he had instructed them to tell no one for what had happened. And as I looked at that, we see where Jesus does that through the Gospels. And it says that at this time concerning raising from the dead might have been counterproductive to his ministry. And so he says, tell no one, basically. But you know that's going to get out. I mean, the girl had died. I don't know about you, but I remember in 2000, and two. My parents divorced when I was young, but I had an uncle that was a person in my life that made a difference in my life. Was not my dad, was not my father, but he was like my dad. He was like my father. I mean, I know some of you have razzed me a little bit because of the Dallas Cowboys, but listen, it's because of my Uncle Lee why I love and like and cheer for the Dallas Cowboys, and it just doesn't matter. I'm not going to change. And it's because of him. He had Crohn's disease, and that is a lethal thing. And I'll never forget spending time in the hospital, and then, days and weeks with my aunt and with my cousin, and just time with him and talking with him. And then I got the phone call, and it's like, man, got the phone call 17 years ago in September. He was gone. And I remember going to the funeral home. I was a youth minister in Duncan. Had been there for a couple of years maybe. And I remember being in there with him. What I'm about to say, don't weird out. But I kind of thought about this text. I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if Jesus just walked in here and said, Lee, get up. But obviously that didn't happen. But that affected me as a kind of a newly married guy, no kids at the time. Man, he just made a difference in my life. He made a huge difference in my life. And losing my dad and others along the way, listen, that's part of pain. That's part of the storms of life and the valleys of life, man. But it's absolutely true what even Jared said on his Twitter the day that he took his own life. But it says it doesn't mean Jesus doesn't offer us companionship and comfort. Man, that's where the hope is. Last night we talked about if you want to grow, it's a Christian growth conference. If you want to grow in your faith, you've got to be in the Word. You've got to spend time with Christ, period. How can you grow in Christ if you don't spend time with Christ? Listen, man, sometimes I think the enemy, we walk through these dark days and these valleys, man, to maybe get us out of the focus. But that's when we need to be in the Word most. That's when we need to be running to Christ most. That's when we need to be praying to Christ most. Listen, help me, Lord. Be with me, Lord. I can't do this on my own. Listen, nowhere in Scripture does it say that we have to do this on our own. I'll never forget, man, this is heartbreaking. I'll never forget, it was a Friday, and one of my best friends calls me and says, listen, hey, there's a youth minister up here by me in Oklahoma. It's in the Tulsa area. He said his wife and him, they're expecting their first child, and they're having their baby soon. And he texted some of us and said, man, I need you to begin to pray. Don't know the details, but they just had to take his wife to the hospital by ambulance. And I knew this guy. I didn't know him well, but I knew him in this youth ministry circle. And man, you look at that and you think, man, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I'll pray. And then come to find out, man, and I bet he's in his 20s, young, married, never had a child before. And I wish I could say that everything turned out good, but listen, his wife, a young bride, first time pregnant with the first child, listen, look at me, she didn't respond again. They delivered the baby. And it was a little boy. But on that Friday, they lost the mom. And I don't know this for sure, but I think it was 2, maybe 3 days later, the baby died. And so you've got a young dad, a young husband that is looking and expecting and waiting for, man, just the joyous of life. And those of you that have kids, you realize, man, life is a gift and all this. And in a matter of days, man, listen, and nowhere did he even probably see that even on the radar, because we don't. But in the matter of a few days, he lost his bride and he lost his child. You want to talk about storms of life? You want to talk about valleys of life? Oh my. To this day, man, though, I can't imagine how I just can't imagine. But God has been good to him, just like he always was before. And listen, that's where he is still a student minister. He's still making a difference for the kingdom. He's still pointing people to Christ. He's still pointing and ministering to a generation of young people, and he still is doing these things, man. But that, I can't imagine. To lose your bride and to lose a child in a matter of days, listen, that has got to be one of the hardest things. When I heard all that, I'm like, man, surely this isn't even true. Man, I hurt for him. I had the privilege to have lunch with him not too far along after that, and just to visit with him, just to try to encourage him. And I still pray for him and pray for him a lot. But tonight, man, if you're going through a hard time, maybe there is healing that needs to take place. Maybe tonight, if you've never accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, maybe tonight is salvation for you. I don't know every single one of you. I don't know if you have Christ in your life. I don't know if you've made him Adonai or not. Maybe some of you are though walking through and you just need to touch his clothes, if you will. Obviously, we can't do that, but he's with us, and he is never forsaking us, and he will never leave us, even in the tough times, even in the bad times. And when the enemy says give up, don't give up. When the enemy says throw in the towel, man, it's getting tough. Just throw in the towel. Throw it all out there, man. Jesus says, no, I have a purpose for your life. I have a plan for your life. I love you. I want a relationship with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Because listen, the reality is this, is sometimes he may be all you have. In the life of my friend, when you go home and you don't have your wife and you don't have your son and you don't have anything, and it's you. And maybe that's a time in his life where Christ was all he had, yet he says that Christ is enough. Man, that's a powerful witness, a powerful deal. And I don't know where you are tonight in your life. I don't know where you are tonight in your walk. I don't know where you are. But listen, man, God does. God knows why you're here. Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you're walking through a valley. Maybe you're at a place to where it'd just be easy to throw in the towel. You're all right, Mom. You're good. It's all good. We needed those too at that age. The fact of the matter is, you kind of... It happens again down the road. That was a bad joke, sorry. But some of you are in here tonight, man. Maybe you want to throw in the towel. Maybe you want to give up. Maybe you don't know Christ. Listen, man, he's the answer. It doesn't mean, listen, no, I say this all the time, all over the country. It doesn't say in the Bible that give your life to Jesus and everything, all the bad things go away. Everything's rosy. Everything's easy. Nowhere does it say that. It actually says, listen, man, if the world hates you because of me, remember this. It hated me first, but yet I've overcome it. The world has hated me first. If they hate you because of me, take heart, because I have overcome the world. And that's just who Jesus is. And for some of us that have given our lives to Him, and you've ran to the cross before, you've given your life to Him before, but maybe there's someone in this room, you've never given your life to Christ. Why not it be this day, September the 10th, 2019, that could be the best day of the rest of your life? I don't know. But I'm going to ask that you would close your eyes for a moment and bow your heads for a moment, and ask that nobody would look around. I'm going to ask that you would just, right there where you are, that you'll just listen. I've just got a couple of questions, and then we'll pray and go. Tonight, I've got to ask this. Could there be somebody in this room? I don't know. But could there be somebody in this room that you've truly never given your life to Christ? You've never surrendered your life to Christ. And Christ has died for you. Christ has a purpose for you. Christ paid the price on the cross through His blood for your sin and for all of your sins and your choices. And Christ wants a relationship with you. Could there be someone in this room, I don't know, that you would say, I've never truly surrendered my life to Jesus. I've never given my life to Christ. I've never done that. I've never made that decision. If that's you, I'm just going to ask that you do something bold and trust me, that you would look up at me right now. I've never given my life to Christ. And if you looked up at me, keep looking at me. Is that what you're telling me? I'm not going to embarrass you. I just want to have a conversation with you. That you've never done that before. Well, man, you're in the right place. Just keep looking at me. Anybody else? Anybody else say, I've never given my life to Christ. I've never done that before. Well, my friend that's looking at me, in a minute I'm going to pray. And I'm going to ask that you would do something for me. And by the way, I'm not going to come back there to you. I'm not going to say, look, you looked at me. But in a minute, whenever I pray, there's going to be, might be a song, might not be, that's coming on. People will stand up. If you're telling me the truth, which I don't think any reason why you would lie, but there's going to be a gentleman up here in a red shirt. And I'm going to ask that if this is where you are, if you've never truly done that and made Christ the Lord of your life, in that moment, there's no judgment here. In that moment that you would walk forward and just take him by the hand and say, listen, this is my name. I looked up at the guy talking, and I've never given my life to Christ. And as I'm looking at you, I'm going to ask you, will you do that?